The baby's too loud. I need a break. Travis said it while rolling his suitcase past me, our 14-day-old daughter shrieking against my chest. Then he flew off to Bali with his buddies and told me not to make him feel guilty about it. It was 4:35 on a Tuesday morning in July. The sky beyond our Cedar Park house was still black, but the air already carried that thick Texas warmth that never fully lifts overnight. I stood barefoot near the front door in a faded navy t-shirt and baggy sweatpants, one hand cradling Lily's head and the other pressed flat against my C-section incision. Travis looked like he had stepped out of a resort brochure. Linen button-down, spotless white sneakers, brand new sunglasses dangling from his collar. I looked like I hadn't slept since Easter. "Please," I said. "Just push it back 1 week." He glanced at his phone rather than at me. "The tickets are non-refundable. That trip was booked 5 days ago." He exhaled like I was the one being difficult. Lily's crying climbed another octave, sharp and gasping, and Travis flinched. "You've survived deployments and emergency operations," he said. "Don't tell me a single baby is beyond what you can handle." That was how Travis weaponized my military career. Whenever he wanted to show me off, I was his tough Navy wife. Whenever he wanted to dodge responsibility, I was apparently too competent to require any help. He bent down and pressed 2 fingers against Lily's forehead. Years earlier, before I boarded a transport for an overseas assignment, he had made that exact same gesture. Back then it had felt intimate and tender. That morning it felt like something staged for an audience. His rideshare pulled away at 4:42. I stayed by the door until the taillights vanished around the corner. Then Lily spit warm formula down the entire front of my shirt. The first several days blurred into one another. Lily had reflux and seemed most miserable between midnight and 4 in the morning. I would feed her, hold her upright, change her, and finally lower her into the bassinet. 12 minutes later the crying resumed. My incision burned whenever I stood too fast. My ankles had swollen to twice their normal size. I kept losing track of whether I had taken my pain medication. One night, after Lily finally surrendered to sleep, I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the closed toilet lid, pressed a folded towel against my abdomen, and cried as silently as I could manage. I considered calling Travis. Then my phone lit up with a video from Colton. Travis was on a speedboat, laughing into the wind while someone popped a bottle of champagne behind him. I turned the phone face down against my knee. 3 days later, I drove to a pharmacy off the highway because we were nearly out of formula and infant gas drops. Lily started fussing before I even reached the register. The cashier scanned everything. My joint debit card was declined. He tried it a second time. "Still not going through," she said gently. A man behind me shifted his basket from one hand to the other. Lily's crying intensified inside the carrier. Sweat gathered under my shirt, and the muscles around my incision clenched so tightly I had to lean against the counter for support. "I have another card." My hands trembled while I dug out the emergency credit card I kept buried in my wallet. I made it to the car, cranked the air conditioning to maximum, and pulled up our bank account. Nearly $21,000 had been transferred out of our emergency savings. I called Travis twice. He didn't answer. 5 hours later he texted. "The resort required a bigger deposit than expected. I'll put it back once the Ashcroft deal closes. Please don't turn this into a crisis." I read the message 4 times. Then I called my father. Raymond arrived from Georgetown that evening carrying diapers, groceries, and a battered olive green army duffel. He was 73 and moved considerably slower than he would ever admit. His right knee gave him trouble on the front steps, but when I asked about it he waved me off. "Just needs grease," he said. He took Lily while I showered. When I came back he was sitting in the nursery recliner wrestling with the tiny snaps on her sleeper. His fingers were stiff from arthritis, and after the 4th failed attempt he looked up at me. "You're going to have to take over the fine motor portion of this operation." It was the first time I had laughed since Travis left. Later that night I found Raymond asleep in the recliner with Lily resting against his chest. One hand lay protectively across her back. The other was pressed against his knee. He was in pain. He had come anyway. I opened our joint email account to track down the bank transfer. That was when I found the messages between Travis and a mortgage broker. He had already initiated the process of refinancing our house. My house. I had bought it before our marriage using money my mother left me and savings accumulated over my military career. The deed had always remained solely in my name. The refinance couldn't proceed without my signature, but Travis had written that I had already given my consent. I stared at the screen until the words stopped swimming. This was no longer about a selfish vacation. My husband was attempting to seize control of my largest asset while I recovered from major surgery and cared for our newborn alone. I didn't call him. I saved every email, built a folder on my laptop, and left a voicemail for Adrian Castellano, a family law attorney recommended by someone at the base. A few minutes later, Travis sent another video from a yacht deck. "Look at me," he said into the camera. "I finally feel alive again." I looked across the room at my father holding my daughter, his hearing aid emitting a faint whistle whenever he turned his head. Travis hadn't left because he needed rest. He had left because he was certain I would keep carrying whatever he dropped. The first time I met Adrian Castellano, Lily slept through nearly the entire appointment. Her tiny car seat sat beside the conference table while Adrian spread legal pads across her desk instead of hurrying me along. She looked to be in her early 50s, composed in a way that reminded me of officers who had witnessed enough chaos to stop reacting to it. "Start wherever makes sense to you," she said. I started with the vacation. Then the missing money. Then the refinance emails. When I finished, Adrian folded her hands. "The good news is that he cannot refinance a house that legally belongs to you without your signature." I finally released the breath I had been holding somewhere in my ribs. "The bad news," she continued, "is that you need to be careful not to let your anger manufacture problems for you." I wasn't planning on it. "I believe you. But don't change the locks yet. Don't drain every joint account. Don't threaten him over text message. Let the paperwork protect you instead of your emotions." That sentence lodged itself in my mind. Let the paperwork protect you. Military life had taught me something remarkably similar years earlier. Procedures exist precisely because emotions become unreliable under pressure. When I got home, Raymond was sitting at the kitchen table wearing reading glasses that looked comically undersized on his face. Lily slept in a portable bassinet beside him while he squinted through the sports section. He looked up. "Lawyer any good?" "I think so." "Good." That was all he said. In our family, good frequently meant I trust your judgment. Over the following week, I built a file. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed facts. Years in Navy logistics had trained me to recognize patterns. Missing equipment. Incorrect invoices. Supplies that vanished one crate at a time rather than all at once. Money wasn't fundamentally different. I created a spreadsheet with dates, transfers, account numbers, emails, and screenshots. Every transaction had a note beside it. The more thoroughly I organized everything, the less this resembled one terrible decision. It looked like months of deliberate planning. One afternoon I discovered Travis had listed my military employment and projected retirement benefits while applying for a business line of credit. He hadn't forged my signature. But he had presented my financial future as though it belonged to him. That wounded me more than I anticipated. Not because of the money. Because I realized he had stopped seeing me as a partner. I had become another asset on his balance sheet. 2 days later my phone rang. "Sweetheart." Travis sounded completely relaxed. I could hear waves behind him. "Quick favor." I didn't respond. "The guys found this private charter. It would really help with networking." "Networking?" "Absolutely. I just need 7,000. Temporary." "No." Silence. "You didn't even think about it." "I did." "You don't trust me anymore?" The question caught me sideways. For one dangerous moment I remembered a different Travis. The man who had driven 16 hours straight to surprise me at my promotion ceremony. The man who sat beside my dad after shoulder surgery, telling terrible jokes until Dad laughed despite the pain. People rarely become monsters overnight. Sometimes they simply make one selfish decision after another until eventually that's all that remains. "I'll pay every dollar back," Travis said. "I know. You know. I know that's what you'll keep saying." I ended the call before he could respond. Raymond had heard enough from the living room. He walked into the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee and set one beside me. "If you sent that money," he asked quietly, "what exactly would you be purchasing?" I stared at my laptop. Hope. Guilt. One more excuse. None of them were worth $7,000. I closed the banking app. 3 days later, Travis's mother arrived. Delphine Sutter climbed out of her sedan with a floral cane and enough sheer stubbornness to convince anyone she didn't actually require it. "The cane's only for uneven sidewalks," she announced before anyone asked. Raymond muttered, "Sure it is." She heard him perfectly. "For your information, my hearing works just fine." Raymond smiled. "Mine doesn't." Their relationship began exactly the way you would expect. Delphine came inside and immediately defended her son. "Travis shouldn't have stayed away this long," she conceded, "but becoming a father frightens some men. He emptied our emergency savings. Married people share their money. He tried refinancing my house. He probably thought." What exactly did he think? She didn't answer. Instead, her phone rang. She frowned at the screen. "It's my credit card company." 5 minutes later, she was sitting at my dining room table looking like someone had quietly removed the floor beneath her chair. There had been several international charges. Luxury resort charges. The card belonged to her. "There must be some mistake," she whispered. "Travis helps me with my accounts." Together we logged into her online banking. There were withdrawals from her retirement savings as well. Nothing enormous. Just enough each month to avoid triggering any attention. Raymond stood behind us without saying a word. Finally, Delphine opened an old tablet that still synced with Travis's messages. She found a conversation with Colton. "Mom signed everything already. She doesn't really track those accounts anymore." She read it once. Then again. She wasn't angry at first. She looked mortified. Then heartbroken. "I raised him better than this." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't pull away. Later that evening, she admitted she had fallen twice during the past year but hadn't told anyone because she feared people would decide she couldn't live alone anymore. Raymond nodded. "Needing help doesn't mean surrendering your life." She looked at him. "Says the man who refuses a cane." He smiled. "Takes one stubborn person to recognize another." For the first time all week, someone laughed. Then my phone buzzed. It was Travis. "I'm planning a welcome home barbecue. Invite the neighbors. Colton and Deshawn are coming too. Preston Ashcroft might stop by. Make the place look nice." I stared at the message. Preston Ashcroft wasn't a friend. He was one of the largest commercial property investors in Austin. I suddenly understood completely. That barbecue wasn't about coming home. It was another business opportunity. And somehow my house was part of the arrangement. I barely slept after reading that message. Not because I feared seeing him again. Because I finally grasped what Preston Ashcroft's name signified. The next morning, after Raymond insisted on staying home with Lily, I drove to Adrienne's office. She was already waiting with a folder open in front of her. "I looked into Preston Ashcroft," she said. "So did I." Adrienne nodded. "Then you know he's one of the biggest private real estate investors in this region." "I also know Travis doesn't invite multimillion-dollar investors to backyard cookouts just to eat brisket." Adrienne slid a document across the desk. "I can't prove what Travis intends to say. But I can tell you this. He has been describing your property as an off-market opportunity." I stared at the paper. "He actually believes he can sell my house?" "I think he believes you'll stay quiet." That stung because it was probably accurate. For years I had shielded Travis from embarrassment. If he forgot birthdays, I invented excuses. If he overspent, I quietly adjusted our budget. If he spoke carelessly, I smoothed things over afterward. Keeping the peace had gradually become another full-time occupation. Not anymore. "I don't want a circus," I told Adrienne. "Good. I don't want people passing bank statements around a backyard." "Also good. I only want one thing." She waited. "I want everyone who has been lied to hear the truth." Adrienne smiled. "That's a considerably stronger position." We agreed on a straightforward plan. If Travis publicly claimed authority over the house, I would calmly ask him to produce my written permission. If he couldn't, I would present the deed and Adrienne's written statement confirming sole ownership. Only after that would the process server hand him the divorce papers and temporary court orders, assuming the judge signed everything in time. There would be no shouting. No name-calling. Facts would do the work. When I got home, Naomi was unloading grocery bags from her trunk. "I figured you'd forget to eat again," she said. "I already did." She handed me a sandwich before I could protest. "So," she asked, What's the battle plan? It's not a battle. She raised one eyebrow. Fine. What's the operation? I laughed despite myself. We're catering the party. No homemade food? I don't have the energy. And I'm finished pretending everything is perfect. Instead of spending 2 days cooking, I ordered barbecue from a family-owned smokehouse in Georgetown that Raymond adored. Brisket, sausage, potato salad, beans, sweet tea. Good food, zero unnecessary stress. Naomi looked at the order confirmation and grinned. You know what I appreciate about you? What? You'll dismantle someone's entire fantasy while making absolutely certain they get decent barbecue first. Even Raymond laughed at that one. The following days reminded me that real life never pauses simply because you're preparing for something important. Lily's reflux worsened. One night she cried for nearly 4 straight hours. By dawn my incision felt like someone had threaded fishing line beneath my skin and yanked it every time I stood. I ignored it until I picked up a laundry basket. Pain shot across my abdomen so abruptly I nearly dropped everything. Naomi drove me to urgent care while Raymond stayed with Lily. The doctor examined the incision and frowned. You've been doing far too much. I don't really have a choice. You always have choices. Easy to say. Considerably harder to live. He warned me against lifting anything heavier than the baby and said recovery would stretch much longer if I kept pushing myself. On the drive home I stared out the passenger window. What if I cancel all of this? I asked quietly. Naomi didn't answer right away. What do you mean? The party. The confrontation. Everything. You can. I swallowed hard. I'm tired. Not angry. Not determined. Just tired. Naomi nodded. I know. What if I'm doing this for the wrong reason? She glanced at me before returning her eyes to the road. Rachel. Yeah. If revenge were your goal, you would have changed the locks the day he left. I looked down at my hands. You've spent a month protecting yourself, your daughter, your father, and even his mother. Don't confuse boundaries with revenge. Those words stayed with me for days. 2 days later another problem surfaced. Adrian called. The judge hasn't signed the temporary possession order yet. My stomach dropped. So he can still walk into the house? If the order isn't signed before he returns, yes. Everything suddenly felt precarious. There was no guarantee my carefully constructed ending would actually materialize. We discussed alternatives. If the paperwork wasn't ready, we would still serve the divorce petition. We simply wouldn't force him out that day. I hated the uncertainty. But it also reminded me this wasn't a movie. Real life doesn't follow tidy schedules. Meanwhile, something unexpected developed between Raymond and Delphine. She came by one afternoon carrying a peach cobbler she'd baked herself. Raymond complained it contained too much cinnamon. She informed him his taste buds had retired years before he did. They sat on the back porch drinking sweet tea while Lily napped inside. After a long silence, Raymond admitted his doctor wanted him to have knee replacement surgery. I've been postponing it. Why? I don't want Rachel taking care of me on top of everything else she's already carrying. Delphine looked down at her cane. I understand. She admitted she had fallen twice over the past year and now avoided taking baths because she was afraid she couldn't get back up. Neither of them wanted sympathy. They wanted dignity. Watching them talk made me realize something important. Growing older isn't about pretending you don't need help. It's about deciding who has earned the right to help you. The evening before Travis came home, I tucked Lily into her bassinet and sat beside her. I recorded a short voice memo on my phone. If you ever listen to this someday, I whispered, I hope you understand that your father leaving wasn't the reason our marriage ended. People make terrible decisions and still find their way back. What ended us was that he kept choosing himself after every single chance he was given. The next morning my phone rang. It was Adrian. The judge signed everything. I closed my eyes. So we're ready? We're ready. Less than an hour later, Travis called from the airport. I could hear Colton and Deshawn laughing in the background. Everything ready for tonight? I looked around the quiet house. Raymond was asleep in the recliner with an ice pack balanced on his knee. Lily was finally resting peacefully. The legal folder sat squarely on the dining room table. Almost, I said. Then I hung up. Tomorrow Travis would walk through that front door believing he still controlled our future. He had no idea that future had already shifted beneath him. The barbecue started at 4 on a Saturday afternoon. Texas heat settled across the backyard like a wet blanket, but a steady breeze carried the smell of smoked brisket down the entire street. Kids chased each other across the grass next door while country music drifted faintly from someone's patio a few houses away. Our backyard looked exactly the way Travis had wanted it to look. Clean tables. Neatly arranged food. Coolers packed with ice. Nothing suggested that by sunset his entire life would be unrecognizable. Raymond sat in a padded lawn chair in the shade, pretending his knee wasn't screaming at him. Every time he shifted his weight, I noticed the tightness gathering around his eyes. Delphine arrived 20 minutes early carrying a peach pie she insisted nobody needed. "I know we already have dessert," she said. "But this one has more butter." Raymond eyed the pie. "I'll be the judge of that." She smiled. "You'll judge anything." It felt strangely comforting watching the two of them bicker over pie crust while Lily slept peacefully inside. For the first time in weeks, my heart wasn't racing. It was steady. At exactly 4:41, a black SUV pulled up in front of the house. Colton climbed out first. Deshaun followed. Then Travis stepped onto the driveway wearing an expensive polo, sunglasses, and the easy smile of a man convinced everything remained precisely where he'd left it. He spread his arms wide. "I'm home." Nobody rushed toward him. Naomi answered the front door before I could. "Shoes off," she said. "The baby's sleeping." Travis laughed. "You've turned this place into boot camp." Naomi shrugged. "Babies appreciate clean floors." He walked inside carrying shopping bags stuffed with souvenirs. He handed Colton a beer before saying hello to his own daughter. That tiny detail lodged itself permanently in my memory. Lily mattered less than making an entrance. When he finally located me in the kitchen, he kissed my cheek for everyone watching. "You look exhausted." "I've had a busy month." He grinned as though I'd paid him a compliment. "I knew you'd handle everything." Of course he did. Handling everything had become my entire reputation. Guests continued arriving. Neighbors, co-workers, a few local business owners. Finally, Preston Ashcroft walked through the gate wearing jeans and a navy sport coat. Travis immediately lit up. "Preston. Glad you made it." Within minutes he was giving Preston a tour of the house. I stayed outside. I waited. Adrian had reminded me not to interrupt too early. Truth lands considerably harder when people hear the lie first. A few minutes later I walked into the living room carrying Lily. Travis stood beside the fireplace explaining renovation concepts. "This wall could come out," he said. "Open concept cells." Preston nodded. "The lot is larger than I anticipated." "It really is." Travis smiled proudly. "And Rachel trusts me with all the property decisions." I waited exactly one more second. Then I spoke. "Travis." He turned. "Yeah. Would you mind showing Preston the document where I gave you permission to sell my house?" Silence. Not theatrical silence. Genuine silence. The kind where everyone in a room suddenly becomes interested in the same conversation. Travis chuckled. "Rachel's joking." I looked at Preston. "I'm not." Travis's smile thinned considerably. "We've discussed selling. We've discussed a lot of things." I kept my voice completely level. "Where's my authorization?" He looked uncomfortable for the first time all afternoon. "Rachel. Just show it." "There isn't one because we're married." I nodded once. "So your answer is no." He stepped closer. "Can we not do this in front of everyone? You brought everyone here." He lowered his voice. "You're tired. You're emotional. Let's not make a scene." I had anticipated that. Not anger. Not denial. Just enough manufactured doubt to make everyone question me instead of him. I reached into the folder Adrian had prepared. "This is the certified property record from Williamson County." I handed it to Preston first. The home was purchased before our marriage using my inheritance and savings from my military career. The deed has always remained solely in my name. Preston read quietly. Then he looked at Travis. "You told me this was jointly controlled." Travis's face flushed. It basically is." "No," I said gently. "It isn't." His brokerage manager happened to be standing only a few feet away. He stepped forward. "Travis, did you know this?" Travis squared his shoulders. "I was acting in the family's best interest." I almost believed that he believed it himself. He wasn't a cartoon villain. He genuinely thought that wanting something badly enough entitled him to have it. I invested our money, he continued. I was building something larger. You took our emergency savings while your newborn daughter needed formula. His jaw tightened. I was going to replace it. After using my employment records to support your business credit application? His eyes widened. You checked that. I checked everything. Before he could answer, another voice cut through. I turn. Delphine walked slowly into the room. The soft tap-tap-tap of her floral cane echoed across the hardwood. Everyone watched her cross the floor. She stopped directly beside Travis. You also used my retirement account. Mom. You charged your vacation to my credit card. I was managing your finances. You were hiding from me. He sighed impatiently. You've been forgetting things lately. Delphine's shoulders straightened. My age made me slower, Travis. She looked directly into his eyes. It did not make me stupid. Nobody spoke. She continued. I trusted you because you're my son. And you treated that trust like a blank check. Raymond pushed himself out of his chair with obvious effort. His knee clearly hurt. He didn't care. He looked at Travis. The women in your life believed in you. You confused that with ownership. Just then the doorbell rang. A man in a gray suit stood outside holding a leather folder. Travis Sutter? Yes. You've been served. He accepted the envelope automatically. Then he began reading. Divorce petition. Temporary financial restrictions. Custody filing. Court order granting me exclusive possession of the home. His expression changed so quickly it almost looked painful. He glanced toward the garage keypad. The code had already been changed under the court order. He looked back at me, then around the room. Finally he whispered, No. He swallowed. No, this can't be happening. I met his eyes. It already happened. You were just on vacation. Nobody applauded. Nobody cheered. Real life doesn't operate that way. Colton quietly picked up his overnight bag. Desham leaned toward Naomi. Know any decent hotels nearby? Without missing a beat she replied, Sure. But you'll be paying for your own room. Even Preston smiled at that. I walked to the hallway closet and returned with a small duffel bag. Inside were Travis's clothes, medication, toiletries, and phone charger. He stared at it. You're throwing me out? I'm giving you what you'll need tonight. You planned all this. No. I shook my head. You planned it. You just assumed I'd keep cleaning up afterward. He looked at Lily sleeping peacefully in my arms. For just a second I saw something I had almost forgotten. Regret. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, it had arrived far too late. As Travis walked toward the front door, Delphine sat down beside Raymond. Raymond struggled to twist open a bottle of water because his fingers had stiffened again. Without saying a word, Delphine took the bottle, opened it, and handed it back. Neither thanked the other. They didn't have to. Some things don't require words. I looked around my home. For the first time in a very long while, it finally felt safe. People often ask what became of Travis after that afternoon. They expect one dramatic ending. A courtroom. Handcuffs. Some perfect moment where everyone applauds. Life almost never works that way. The truth is quieter. And in my opinion, considerably more satisfying. Over the following months, Travis's world contracted steadily. His brokerage suspended him while investigating complaints about how he had represented properties to prospective investors. Preston Ashcroft withdrew from every discussion involving Travis, and word traveled quickly through Austin's commercial real estate community. Nobody wanted to work with someone whose definition of ownership depended entirely on who was asking. The divorce moved through the court system exactly the way Adrian had predicted. Fully. Methodically. Emotion never carried the weight that documents did. The bank records mattered. The emails mattered. The property deed mattered. The court granted me primary custody of Lily while giving Travis structured visitation. He was also ordered to repay a substantial portion of the money he had taken from both me and his mother. He wasn't arrested. He wasn't ruined overnight. He simply had to live inside the consequences of choices he had convinced himself were justified. Oddly enough, once everything finally settled, that's when I started falling apart. For weeks I had been running purely on adrenaline. Now there was silence. Lily slept a little longer at night. The lawyers called less frequently. Raymond had gone back home. My body finally registered that the emergency had ended. One afternoon I sat in my car outside the grocery store and couldn't make myself walk inside. My hands were shaking. I wasn't afraid of Travis anymore. I was simply depleted. My doctor diagnosed postpartum anxiety and referred me to a counselor through a military family support program. During my first appointment, I calmly explained everything. The money. The lawsuit. The baby. I sounded like I was delivering a logistics briefing. The counselor listened quietly before asking one simple question. What happened to Rachel? I frowned. What do you mean? You've told me what happened to your marriage. She smiled kindly. But you haven't told me what happened to you. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Then without any warning I started crying. Not graceful tears. The kind that leave you embarrassed and unable to catch your breath. I realized something that afternoon. Strength had been my identity for so many years that I had forgotten strong people are allowed to break too. Raymond finally agreed to the knee replacement surgery he'd been postponing. Recovery wasn't easy. He despised using a walker. One morning I automatically reached over to help him stand. He looked at me with that familiar stubborn expression. I can do it. Instead of insisting, I asked, do you want help or do you want me to wait? He smiled. Now that's a better question. Sometimes he accepted my arm. Sometimes he didn't. The choice mattered far more than the assistance. A few months later, Delphine decided to move into a smaller independent senior community outside Georgetown. It wasn't a nursing home. It was simply easier. No stairs. Grab bars in the bathroom. Neighbors who checked on one another. She made the decision entirely herself. When Travis accused me of forcing her out of her house, she answered before I could. I chose this. She tapped her cane once against the sidewalk. Being independent doesn't mean pretending you're 25. Raymond laughed. I've been trying to tell myself that for years. The two of them became unlikely friends. They still argued every single time they saw each other. Raymond claimed Delphine made terrible coffee. Delphine insisted his hearing aids only functioned when people agreed with him. Neither one ever won. Neither one ever stopped trying. Lily turned one the following summer. We celebrated in the backyard. Nothing elaborate. Hamburgers. Potato salad. A grocery store birthday cake leaning slightly sideways from the Texas heat. Raymond sat in a comfortable chair wearing a ball cap Lily kept attempting to steal. Delphine walked carefully across the patio with her floral cane while Lily gripped two of her fingers, taking uncertain little steps. Watching them together nearly brought me to tears. Travis arrived 20 minutes late carrying an expensive toy almost larger than Lily herself. He looked different. Older somehow. Less certain of everything. He handed me the gift. I thought she'd like this. Thank you. I handed it right back. Can you feed her lunch first? He looked surprised. Sure. He struggled with the tiny spoon. Lily grabbed mashed bananas with both hands and immediately smeared them across her face. Then across Travis's shirt. He looked at me, silently asking for rescue. A year earlier I would have stepped in without thinking twice. This time I smiled. You've got it. He cleaned her face. Changed her shirt. Wiped down the high chair afterward. Awkwardly. Fully. But he did it. As he packed up to leave he stopped beside me. Colton and Deshawn don't really call anymore. I nodded. I figured. I guess they liked my money more than they liked me. There wasn't much to say to that. A few weeks later, Colton mailed me a check covering part of the vacation expenses along with a handwritten note. I should have stopped him. I'm sorry. I deposited the check. Then I let the entire thing go. Because by then I understood something I had completely missed during those brutal first weeks. The greatest punishment Travis would ever receive wasn't losing the house. Or the money. Or even his professional reputation. It was knowing that every warm family moment he witnessed from then onward would remind him of the 1 month he willingly traded away. As the sun set on Lily's birthday, Raymond complained that someone had taken the last corner piece of cake. Delphine calmly admitted she had. You snooze, she said, you lose. Raymond pointed a finger at her. I knew I couldn't trust you. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. I looked around the yard. None of us were perfect. Raymond still walked carefully. Delphine still leaned on her cane. I still had days when anxiety arrived without any warning. Healing hadn't erased our scars. It had simply taught us how to carry them. I used to believe revenge meant making someone hurt the way they hurt you. Now I know better. Real victory is building a life where they no longer determine whether you feel safe, respected, or at peace. If you've ever had to close the door on someone you once loved, I hope you remember that protecting your peace isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the kindest thing you can possibly do for yourself and for the people who genuinely stay.